Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
With your host, certified Cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura Mosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
Today's guest is MJ Williams.
So sit back,
pop a cold one,
and dive into some books
and brews.
Yeah. So whenever you want to say. Welcome to episode number 55 of Books and Brews. So, Laura, how has your month been?
Well, our month continues to be interesting. I'm up and about now, and we actually got sheep this month. So, we started small a couple years ago. Like, I had managed to raise 9 children. So I thought, well, if I can raise kids, I can certainly grow a garden, right? But, I really wasn't very good with plants. So 2 years ago, we started by saying, can I at least keep a head of lettuce alive? And when I did that, we moved on up to chickens. And I confess, anyone who's ever owned chickens is probably going to die laughing, but I was really scared I was not going to be able to keep chickens alive. And so turns out I could. So then we moved on up to rabbits. The same thing, like, oh my gosh, rabbits are going to take more care than chickens. And man, if rabbits don't want to be picked up, they can scratch you pretty badly and bite you pretty badly. And so now we've moved up to sheep. We've had them a week today, right?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. So,
we didn't manage to lose them or anything.
Yeah, well, actually we did. We lost the one. And, what happened, it was quite the job getting them first from the previous owners into the trailer. And then once we got the 2 trailers backed up together, they didn't want to get out. So then we had to encourage them to move over to our trailer. So then we got them home, and now it was just the 2 of us trying to get them from our trailer into the pasture, and the trailer was too big to be right against, to match up. So we did end up losing one that just suddenly bolted off
the trailer
off the edge of the trailer, ran off. And in retrospect, it only took 10 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. But it was a really scary 10 minutes trying to get that sheep. Like, man, we're about to just set fire to $200 and have nothing to show for it. So
at the end, we exploited their flock concept. We chased the rest of them into the pasture, and then the 4th one was like, I gotta be with the other ones. And so and we were very happy at that point.
Yeah.
We were smarter than the sheep.
Yeah. It's a sad thing. Over the last 2 years, I have been outwitted by both chickens and rabbits. So this time I outwitted the sheep. So have you done any reading?
I have. I've spent some time largely in professional reading, but I have had some fun with another Lee Child book, the Jack Reacher novels, which are, marvelous to digest and eat. But my favorite book that I've been spending time in is this book on sheep. We learned all sorts of interesting things in this very well put together book about how to take care of them and how not to take care of them. So that was fun. What kind of books have you been reading, Laura?
Well, I was very excited. My friend Rebecca made hope, and I love her name because it's a whole sentence. She finally put out this book that she had been writing on when I was still with the writers group in the Twin Cities. It's called Destination Harmony. It is a novel of the Owenite experiment. And I'm really excited to finish this. I started it because it opens with these people in the 1800s, I think it's late 1800s, who are quite sure that they have gathered the smartest, brightest minds in all of America. And because they're smarter than anyone else, they're going to create this wonderful utopia, I believe in Ohio. And no Ohio jokes. And so this boatload full of knowledge, as it was called, and this is historically true, smartest people in the entire country have the bright idea to get in a boat in January. And imagine what happens. It didn't occur to any of them that they might get iced into the rivers. So they sat in their boat, iced in for an entire month before they were able to finally move. So naturally, night riders the group, we all got a huge kick out of that. And so I'm starting to dig into the full novel, most of which I haven't heard. And then I'm also trying to get through Jesus and Judas, and this was written by last month's guest. So he sets out the premise that Jesus and Judas actually knew each other long before, well, back into their childhoods. And it's an interesting premise, and the research that he did is very interesting as to how he backs up why that might be true.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Laura, who's our guest this month?
well,
Or guests?
I'm going to introduce our guest three ways. Our guest, singular, is MJ Williams. However, that is the pen name for Peggy Joque Williams and Mary Joy Johnson, who co-write. They are sisters-in-law, and you co-write together. So let me read the official bio, and there are the books. There's a very horrifying story about an RV coming up, which I'm still not fully adjusted to sitting in the RV when he drives, or especially when I drive. So, but we'll get into that. Peggy Joque Williams is a freelance writer and book editor. She co-wrote and independently published 2 mystery novels with her sister-in-law, Mary Joy Johnson, On the Road to Death's Door, a Wisconsin Library Association Award winner, and On the Road to Where the Bells Toll. A retired elementary school teacher, Peggy has taught creative writing classes and workshops for Madison College and the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Department of Continuing Studies. She's a member of the Women's Fiction Writers Association, which is called, I believe, Sisters in Crime, or am I wrong? Are those 2 separate things?
The 2 separate, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. And the Wisconsin Writers Association. And you have the first novel, Courting the Sun, Novel of Versailles, coming out this coming May. So,
Yes.
Mary Jo, I didn't get
Mary Joy.
Mary Joy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Every time I look at that, I see that, and I know it's not Mary Jo. I believe you're a retired professor.
Yes, I am. I taught writing at a community college
Okay,
in Escanaba,
fantastic.
Michigan for 30 years. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But do you live in Wisconsin now?
I live in Wisconsin now. When I retired, I moved south.
Okay.
About 250 miles.
And, sitting down here in the sunny October, I have to laugh at the idea that moving to Wisconsin is moving south.
Yes.
Is it any warmer than Michigan, or is it about the same?
I was in the Upper Peninsula, which is pretty cold in the winter and long winters. Takes a long time to warm up.
Yeah, we were in Duluth, and
Yeah.
probably shouldn't rehash the trauma of last winter.
Yeah. Then you understand.
Were you near the Porcupine Mountains then?
No, I was in Escanaba, which is on the southern shore. It's about 100 miles north of Green Bay.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've spent a fair amount of time in the UP, so
Yeah.
it's a neat place. I do like it.
It's a lovely place. Yes. Yeah.
We are ready for cocktail number 1.
Well, as I was reading the first reading, about camping out and about, all the wonderful fun people were having in the beverages they were consuming, it reminded me of, the idea of making your own ice cream, rolling that rock salt ball around and all these types of things. So I came up with this drink called When the Kids Are Away, which I thought is a very neat drink. This actually has a couple ounces of Jack Daniel's Tennessee Fire. That's their cinnamon whiskey, with some simple syrup, vanilla ice cream, a ripe banana, and whole milk. So we blend it all up, and then we'll pour it into a glass, put a little whipped cream and some banana on top. So if you hear the blender, that's what's going on.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I want to drink of it.
We'll pour it in one of the glasses, which I like this
Wow.
particular glass because it'll kind of showcase the drink
Yeah.
to a degree. I will slice some banana and throw some whipped cream on there as soon as I find it. And this drink has a really neat kind of a flavor because it's kind of a cross between an ice cream sundae and it's got that kind of faint alcoholic taste to it, but it's distinct because it is whiskey that's in there. So I will let, here is the drink when the
Oh
kids
my
go
gosh.
back, and I will let Laura try that.
Okay. So this is an amazing drink, and I've already had a preview, so I know that. So I'll try not to embarrass myself by just guzzling the whole thing. We'll have to take a picture of the inside of this because it's so beautiful. Hold that for me for just a second. So all whipped cream, and I might end up with a whipped cream mustache. It's really good.
The interesting thing about this drink is also because of that cinnamon flavor, they make a kid's soda that's like that made, those cinnamon red hot type things. So you could actually make a kid's version of this, which is probably both a blessing and a curse. You could have your kids going, wow, I didn't know adult beverages could be so delicious. But on the other hand, they could also share an experience with their parents without actually, consuming
Right,
alcohol.
yeah.
That is marvelous.
So
It's got that wonderful cinnamon
yeah,
flavor backed by the ice cream.
this is delicious. And I have, depending what beer Michael has chosen in the past, what Michael calls my IPA face, which is this is opposite. I'm gonna have him just keep making these the whole hour and well into tomorrow. So we're ready for reading number 1.
Okay. This is from the opening chapter from On the Road to Death's Door. The campground smelled vaguely of wood smoke and pine. Maple and birch leaves rustled softly, if unseen, against the mottled, star-spotted sky. Emily Remington carried an armload of cut firewood and dumped it next to a brick-lined pit in the ground. She looked up in time to see Stan and Malcolm clamber to the top of the ladder attached to the back of the RV. They looked like wraiths in the swaying light of the Coleman lantern. Stan was carrying the Coleman lantern Stan was carrying in one hand. "Be careful up there, hon," Audrey shouted. Malcolm waved her off. Stan grunted more from the exertion of climbing over the lip of the ladder than from any kind of an editorial statement. The Winnebago was tucked into a copse of maple trees, and the two men had to duck to avoid being backhanded by a low-hanging branch. Malcolm pulled a handkerchief from his back pocket and swiped at his forehead. When he had tucked it back away again, he pulled a small bottle out from the front pocket. He offered it to Stan first. Stan grinned and accepted the drink. Standing on top of the huge vehicle, legs askance, he threw his head back and took a long slurp. He handed the bottle back to his friend, then surveyed the campsite from his new vantage point. Emily was busy arranging the dried logs into a teepee shape in the middle of the fire pit. Audrey bustled up beside her. "This is so rustic," Audrey exclaimed as she busied herself about the campsite, martini glass in hand. She picked up a lawn chair and swiped at it with a tissue while Emily, on her knees, blew at the glowing licks of flame. "One used carpet ready to be delivered," Stan announced. The two women turned and watched as their men positioned themselves on either side of a 6-foot-long carpet roll. Emily grabbed her can of beer from the picnic table, enjoying the scene as if from a theatrical show. "I still cannot believe you bought that thing at a garage sale," Audrey chattered. She took another drink from her stemmed glass. "That is just so quaint." "Man, this thing is heavy," Stan complained. "What did you do, Em? Hide a body in it?" The two men grunted and heaved, but couldn't get the carpet roll to move into a controlled position. "How about we just shove it off?" Malcolm suggested. "Sounds like a plan to me," Stan said, breathing heavily. "Hey, ladies, heads up. It's raining carpeting on 3, he directed. Malcolm nodded, putting his weight behind the carpet. 1, 2, 3. They shoved at the bundle and rolled it off the top of the RV. "Oh, shit." Onto the awning. "Damn." Which bent and ripped under its weight. "Crap." And fell to the ground in a thud. "Stan," Emily shouted, "what are you doing?" She stared in dismay at the ripped awning with its bent support struts. "I don't know, Em," Stan said, standing on top of the Winnebago, hands on his hips, looking for all the world like a king of the mountain. if we got to do this much work to get it down, what are we going to do when it's time to get it back up? I think you need to work those arm muscles a bit more. The guys at the garage sale didn't have any trouble getting it up there. Stan signaled Malcolm to climb down the ladder ahead of him. He rubbed his hands against the sudden chill of the evening and then clambered himself down, eager to stand in front of Emily's already blazing fire. Okay, let's roll this baby out and see what we got. He pulled out his pocket knife and cut the twine which bound the rug. He positioned a foot against one end of the roll and signaled Malcolm to do the same at the other end. On my count again, 1, 2, with a dual grunt, they pushed, hop, unrolling the carpet, one lump at a time. Finally, Stan gave it one last mighty heave with his foot. What the? They stared in horror as first an arm, then a leg, and finally an entire body flopped out of the bundle. Stan, Emily, and Malcolm stared in stunned silence. Audrey screamed.
I think everybody can guess what's in that rug. After reading the book, and especially as I was listening to this again, I came back to how did somebody get that carpet up on top of the RV? In your own minds, did you have an answer for that?
Somebody high on crack.
That makes a lot of sense.
There you go.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Okay, yeah, superhuman strength. One thing I found really interesting, I just assumed you're writing a series based on RV travel, but neither of you really has any RV experience. So how did you end up writing novels about RV travel?
I don't know. It just arose one night years ago as we were sitting around the fire drinking brandy Manhattans that my dad always fixed them. We had read something about somebody finding a body in a rolled up carpet, and somehow or other then it got to the Walmart parking that people in RVs do, and it just grew from there.
So you already
Writers do that, you know.
Yes, they do. Well, and I thought it was funny because as I was reading, I'm thinking we're actually kind of writing a whole series of mystery novels. They're the Ivy League mystery novels. And
Very noirish.
yeah, well, they're meant to be kind of humorous. And I find, of course, that sometimes I can write humorously, but with this one, I just keep coming back to serious. So he has to put the humor in.
But noir.
The noir, right. We're trying to kind of play off that style and be funny about it. And I'm not funny. So, but the whole reason this series started was because I think it was January of 2019. My son, who was 16 at the time, he and I were at a writer's book fair in Amelia Island, Florida. And on the way home, we stopped at IHOP, and he got his steak almost immediately. And 25 minutes later, they told me they didn't have the chicken noodle soup I'd ordered. And I was sick that night. It was January. I couldn't afford a hotel. We needed to get home. So I was really upset. Like, okay, could you have at least told me right away that there was no chicken noodle soup? Why did it take 25 minutes? And like you say, that's what a writer does. I started thinking, what was going on in that kitchen? And then I started thinking, wait a second, what do you two know about bodies and rugs? What gave you that idea? But you answered that, so I'll believe your answer now. So, I'm assuming, Mary Joy, if you were teaching writing classes, you've probably done some writing before, creative writing?
Some, not fiction particularly. I belonged to a writers group for a while where we would do little short stories and poems, but they never went anywhere. It was just more social time than anything else, and kind of honed my editing skills. But I obviously had written a lot for work and done that kind of thing. So yeah.
So how did the two of you end up writing together? How did that start?
It started when she was still living up in the UP and I was down here. And we ended up writing long distance and sending things back and forth. But once she moved here, then we could sit together. But what we would do first is we would brainstorm a pretty detailed outline. And then we would each take chapters that spoke to us. And so I always say we kind of wrote the book inside out, because sometimes we could write the ending first, we could write, you know, what led up to it. And then we did sit together for all the rewrites and all the editing. And that blended our voice together. I don't think you could tell through it that one or the other of us wrote a particular chapter.
And you anticipate everything I'm going to ask, because that's what I was thinking, was if you're each writing chapters, you end up with, and I mean, I read the whole book. I only started on the second one. I didn't have time to finish all of it, but it was one voice. And so how do you manage to blend those two voices into one?
Well, I think we're pretty similar in our voices to begin with. And so that helped a lot. But it was really the collaboration that I didn't let my chapter and be stubborn about it and say, you can't do anything to that. We worked together to pull it together somehow. And in the rewrite, it happened. You know, we just bounce ideas back and forth and bounce sentences back and forth until we found what felt right to us.
Right.
But
I guess
we also used each other's strengths. So my strength is dialogue. And scenes come to me first as dialogue. And Mary Joy's strength is scene, like creating a room or what people are wearing or what the outdoors looks like. And
I find your description of the process very interesting, because over the last several years, I've been co-writing a book with Dr. Kendall Price, and it's a fantasy story. It's a trilogy, which is not done yet, but it's a very different process because he's really the primary author. So it's co-writing because I'm writing a lot of the scenes and I'm editing, I'm fleshing out a lot of what he's done, but it's a very different process. Whereas you two are each writing an individual scene. He writes the whole book. I go through, edit, add as I see necessary. I send it back to him and he does the same thing. And so it's interesting to hear such totally different processes. One thing I really liked about the book was the detective. How do you pronounce his name? Pelletier?
Pelletier.
He started off seeming like a real jerk, but I thought you did a great job of not letting him just be this stock jerk sheriff from small town. What advice would you give other wannabe authors or actual authors about fleshing people out, letting them be three-dimensional and real and not just, you know, good or bad or flat?
so how we go about doing that?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've studied the process of writing a lot and character building and character arcs. We've also modeled different people after people we know. Interestingly enough, Mary Joy's ex-husband is a police officer up in the UP. And he was so sure that he read the book and he was so sure that we had modeled that Pelletier after him. We had actually modeled Emily after him.
How does he feel about that?
And we didn't tell him that. We just let him go on and believe that we had modeled Pelletier after him.
Well, let's hope he's not among our 8.3 million listeners, because if he is, now he knows. We're ready for cocktail number 2.
Well, with this one, set with fireworks around the 4th of July and everything like that, I had to come up with a July 4th cocktail. So I came up with this one called the Blue Independence, which involves some gin, some Domaine de Canton, which is actually a ginger liqueur, which I wasn't able to find, so I had to substitute a little bit there. Some lemon juice and some blueberries mulled together. But having tried this cocktail the other night, the lemon juice was a little strong, so I'm calling an audible, and we're going to do some blue raspberry vodka instead in order to get the blue with a little bit of blackberry, which I think will be neat. So we're going to start by putting some ice in a shaker. And I have to ask, of course, as the show's resident bartender, if your writing style also benefits from the Brandy Alexanders and things like that. Just to
Actually, I don't like Brandy Alexander's, but it's a UP drink, and of course they're living in the UP. That's where the Emily and Stan are from. So it's very obviously their drink.
very good. Right now, I'm mulling I think it's mulling the blackberries and some ginger that I put together, and we're going to add that to the shaker.
That sounds like a really healthy drink.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. You know, if it weren't for
all the
the
more reason to keep drinking.
right, if it weren't for the vodka, the gin,
Yeah.
an extremely healthy drink. So let's see. Alrighty,
And I think this was the one I didn't care for quite so much.
with the lemon juice, but this
Yeah.
one you may have some better time with.
Right, because this is a variation on it.
Yes. So we're adding the gin and the blue vodka, and then we get to shake this. It'll be served in a martini glass, and the fun part about it is that I'm going to rim the martini glass with some rainbow sherbet to go with the blue cocktail.
So what I'm doing now is just turning the martini glass upside down. And are you able to see that covered in sherbet?
I have to use both these drinks in the next.
Great. And here you have the Blue Independence.
And
Wow.
yeah, it's more purple this time. This is really interesting because the one we had the other night when we were trying these out, because these are much more complex than some of the drinks that he's done. The one the other night was just kind of like peach colored, or it was a completely different color.
Right, much more lemon juice oriented.
It's still a little tart,
Okay.
but I think I like it better than the other night. So I would love to see this in a bright blue, like the one we did with Patty Perrin. That was a really good drink, and that was electric blue. So we are ready for reading number 2.
Okay, so I'm going to read from On the Road to Where the Bells Toll, which takes place in Boston. And it starts out the first chapter. 4th of July fireworks always set Emily Remington's nerves on edge. The heart-pounding booms, cascades of flaming light, and the acrid smell of smoke all brought her back to the horror of that one night decades ago. She shut her eyes momentarily against the popping flashes of the bottle rockets and took a deep breath. It'll be okay, she told herself. This is a different time, a different place. She was on vacation. She opened her eyes and allowed herself to enjoy the sight of her family sprawled out on the blanket. 9-year-old twins, Annabelle and Alan, snuggled on either side of their grandpa Stan like pixie bookends. 13-year-old Winter, leaning placidly against son-in-law Philip's legs, ignoring the bombs bursting in air as she thumbed furious texts into her phone. And daughter Megan, transfixed by the melting colors in the sky, layered one on top of the other. Nope, this was a good night. No murder, no mayhem, no dead bodies. Nothing like the night that building exploded on campus. Just good old-fashioned 4th of July family time. The celebration on the Boston Esplanade ended in the usual mind-numbing, heart-thumping whiteout of 100 fireworks all going off at the same time. The crowd around them erupted in a roar of approval, clapping, shouting, whistling. I love it, I love it, I love it, Ellen shouted. She and her twin deserting Stan to jump up and dance. Good show, huh? Megan said to her mother. My ears are still ringing. Emily stood and stretched. We might as well stay put for a while, Philip said, rolling over onto his back. It'll take a while for this crowd to disperse, and I'd rather sit here and enjoy the evening than fight for space on the tee. A hush had settled over the park as families gathered their belongings, folded blankets, searched in the dark for lost flip-flops. I'm not in any rush. Stan grabbed for Annabelle and then Alan and began a tickle fight. Emily didn't often agree with her son-in-law's take on things, but surveying the dispersing crowd, she was relieved this was the first 4th of July in a long time that she wasn't responsible for crowd control. She was happy and content to sit back and relax in the balmy night air. Disentangling himself from the girls on the blanket, Stan struggled to his feet and reached into the cooler for a bottle of water. Anyone else? I'll have one, Dad. Thanks. Megan held out her hand. Mumsy, may I have another tonic? Winter asked. Mumsy? Emily asked. It's a phase. I hope. Dad, can you grab a can of soda for Winter? Alan and Annabelle, realizing their older sister had beaten them to the forbidden pleasure, bounded to the cooler. I got to the last root beer. Alan waved the can in her sister's face and then shrieked when Annabelle grabbed it and dodged away. Mom, she knows I hate grape, and that's all that's left. Alan lunged for her sister, now standing 10 feet away and taunting her. Annabelle sidestepped. Alan flew past, stumbled and spun, trying to stop herself. Alan, Megan cried out, but it was too late. The little girl tumbled over a nearby beach chair, taking its occupant down with her. Alan immediately jumped up, her hands over her mouth in remorse. But Emily was at the woman's side in an instant, mumbling apologies for her granddaughter. She bent over to extend a hand, but sensed something was wrong, deadly wrong. The woman stared up at her with vacant eyes. Emily reached down to feel for a pulse, then recoiled at the cold flesh. What is it? Stan asked, moving toward her. Is she okay? I think you and Megan should leave now and take the kids home. Philip, call 911. Did I hurt her? Alan asked. Emily wrapped Alan in her arms. Honey, you go with Grandpa to help your mom with the blankets. Why? What's wrong with her? Come on, sweetheart. Grandma will take care of it. Stan took the girl's hand and walked her over to her mother. Let's pack up, he said to his daughter. Annabelle, grab that cooler and drag it over here, okay? While Philip spoke tersely into his cell phone, the others gathered up their things. Emily took the small blanket from under the dead woman's picnic basket and draped it loosely over the body to keep the curious passerbys from stopping and gawking. But she hadn't noticed Winter, who was hovering over her shoulder. Grandma, the slender teenager, stood with her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if she were deadly cold. That's the lady Grandpa and I went to see yesterday.
That last sentence is even more unexpected. I mean, we expect someone to die in a murder mystery, right? But what's Grandpa up to? I really like this scene in part because I've actually been to that 4th of July concert on the Esplanade, so I'm assuming you have been too.
Not to the event. I've been to Boston. I've spent a lot of time in Boston. And one year, 2015, I think it was, I was back and forth to Boston. And when I added up all the time, I'd been there about 2.5 months out of the year.
Okay.
And we've been down to the Esplanade, but not for that event that mostly we've watched on TV every year.
It's a pretty amazing event to be at.
Yeah.
It's just people stretch for, I don't know, a mile or something, just jam-packed. And, there's such an exciting atmosphere. There were no dead bodies the day I went, to my knowledge. One of the things that I kind of liked about your book and the second reading, you keep coming back to this bombing, which, somebody who reads your first book is going to know what that's about. And I guess it's more of a comment, but I just like the fact that you keep bringing this up and how it impacts people for their entire lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never going away.
Yeah. And it's a fictionalized version of a real event that happened in Madison back in 1970, I believe it was.
Since I've moved to Madison and people have read my book, people who were here at the time of the bombing where someone was killed, one woman whose husband worked in that building, and how they, so we did fictionalize it, but at the same time, it was based on a real event and pretty traumatic for people living in Madison.
Yeah. Are some of the details of the trial and so on real or fictionalized, like the car being stolen versus whether he really
That's all fiction.
It's all fiction.
Because they never caught the one guy.
They've never caught the one guy.
There were a couple of guys involved in it, but one of them they've never caught.
Hmm.
Interesting. You have talked in one of your interviews about internalizing your characters' personalities. Do you ever find that you're writing dialogue, or I guess in this day and age, it's writing dialogue, not writing dialogue, and all of a sudden words come out of their mouth that you didn't intend, or things that you would not think up on your own?
Yes, and I think not so much dialogue, but the one time that I remember in writing the first book, where they're in Door County and staying at this Peninsula State Park. I think we named it Moose's Leap or something or other. We fictionalized it at any rate. But as I was writing this scene, with Emily walking down a path through the woods, her phone rings, and I didn't know her phone was going to ring, and it's her daughter. I didn't know she had a daughter. And of course, in the second book, it heavily involves, their daughter and her family. So it's like, I don't know where that came from. It just was there.
Right. And that's so funny. And I'm guessing that people who don't write have a hard time understanding how that happens. But I've always said, so my book, it started off as a standalone. It ended up being 5 books. And in book 2, Angus the cop walked in, and I'm like, who are you? What are you doing here? And 2 or 3 books later, I'm like, this guy's causing me a lot of trouble. I'm having a really hard time. I should just go back and write him out. And he's just kind of like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're the good guy. So how come you're causing me so much trouble and refusing to leave? But it really is amazing the way characters begin to speak.
And he ended up with a t-shirt.
He did. Yeah, we have a t-shirt that says, what is it, Team Sean or Team Angus?
That's right. We saw which one was more popular.
Yeah, we should dig those out again. So, mysteries are interesting to me, especially since I'm now trying to write some myself. And I think you have to really have a talent and a skill for sprinkling in enough clues, but not too many. How did you learn that? What is your trick to making it enough that the reader has a fighting chance, but not so much that it's obvious?
That I have to credit to Mary Joy, because she's kind of the queen of mystery novels. She has such a collection of novels, and she talks about the authors on her shelves like as if she knows them. And just is so wide read in terms of mysteries. And so she is the guiding force with us, making sure that we have the red herrings, making sure that we have the clues planted. We tried planting a clue in the first book, and it turned out to be so obvious that Mary Joy's sister caught it on a first reading and knew absolutely who had done it. So we ended up taking that one out.
And I have to say, having read the entirety of the first book, you did a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't really see that coming up until much closer to when it did. So, yeah. So what do you think is the best part of writing?
I like the editing better than the writing.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Me
I like taking what's down on paper and molding it and crafting it into something. The hardest part for me is
the first words on
words on the page.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I know a lot of people don't like the editing, but editing is writing.
Well, it is. It's hard too.
It's hard, but we would literally sit there and say, this sentence is boring. How can we make it better? Or this paragraph, is just there. It's not speaking to us or whatever. So crafting it comes in that editing stage.
Right. Whereas I have to say, I like just sitting down and writing, which is why I was up until 3 a.m. this morning. Got in the zone and couldn't stop. So we are ready already for cocktail number 3.
Well, as I was reading the tale of an RV in downtown Boston, I or at least in the around the area of Boston. I was thinking of my own travels through Boston, particularly during the time of the Big Dig, when I was, doing some professional travel around that area and ending up lost everywhere, no matter where I went, And the one thing I remember too is that, don't let Boston drivers see weakness in your eyes because they will run you.
Yes.
So I'm thinking of a drink one would like to have in hand either as the driver or as an external observer and of the situation here. And I came up with the Boston, which is a gin-based cocktail, some apricot brandy, a little lemon juice, and a little grenadine for color. So we're going to start not with those particular ice cubes because they have a little too much blackberry in it, but we're going to start with some different ice cubes. We're going to start with a couple of ounces of dry gin. Interestingly, gin has a lot of different varieties these days. And the dry gin ends up being a very good one for this, instead of the more botanical or floral gins that some people might have. And then we have some apricot brandy, which we'll throw in about just as much as we did the gin. So this will give us some distinct flavor we have not had on this show before.
Apricot brandy just sounds wonderful.
It does.
Even if we're not brandy lovers.
Right, yeah, exactly. We'll throw in probably not too much lemon juice, just to keep it a little on the sweeter side.
Not too tart.
Right, and then of course the real sweetness and the wonderful color comes from a bit of grenadine, which many people may have had when they were growing up as part of a Shirley Temple or something like that. So, and yet it ends up having a wonderful use in a lot of drinks as you grow up. So we will shake this and serve it in a nice little bowl-shaped cocktail glass here.
I love all the different glasses you have.
Yes.
Gotta do this right.
Yeah.
So this is the third one that we didn't try, or I haven't. I don't know if you
Right.
have
Nope.
already.
I haven't mixed it yet myself.
So this is, raw footage.
This is the Boston. Cheers.
Cheers. That's got quite a kick to it. It's definitely tart, but it's tart in a way that I like a little better than the other one. I could see having a few of these, even though I'm making like a sour puckered up face. And yet I'll probably keep drinking it. So I actually lived in Boston for 3 months. It was a really good experience. But yes, I was what was I, 18? No, I think I was 19 at the time. It was the summer after my freshman year of college. I was really glad I wasn't driving there. So, and especially after reading this reading. So, go ahead.
Take it away.
Reading number 3.
Okay. So just to know that in this scene, in general, in both books, Stan is the one who enjoys driving the RV. He's a thinker, he's a historian, and he just likes to drive and think. Whereas Emily, who is the former police officer, she's happy to just ride along, but she does the maintenance on the RV. And the problem in this scene is that she fell asleep and Stan was daydreaming and he missed his exit to the campground. And so he ended up in the city, and you do not want to drive an RV in the city of Boston.
You don't want to drive anything in the city of Boston, let alone an RV.
Yeah. So they started out arguing because she woke up and realized they were lost. And he says, maybe I should take a look at the map. He thrust the GPS at her before she could refuse again. I can pull over. Where? There's no parking anywhere. A familiar trill, for Elise sounded. Fumbling for her aging flip phone, Emily grabbed unsuccessfully for the map and the GPS, sliding onto the floor between her legs. Damn. Hello, Megan. Hi, honey. Mom, how close are you? That's what we're trying to figure out. What do you mean? Did Dad miss an exit again? Where exactly are you? Emily glanced at her husband, whose expression was stony. Dunno. I thought we were on Soldiers Field Road, but now it says Storrow Drive. You're in Boston, Mom? You were supposed to get off at 495. The campground is up near Lexington. I know, honey. We got cut off by a semi before your dad could get into the lane. She nodded in acknowledgement as Stan mouthed, "Thank you," then wiggled in her seat, wiping beads of sweat from her forehead and lip. She reached for one of the still folded maps and began to fan herself. "Damn hot flashes," she murmured under her breath. "Put me on speakerphone," Megan demanded. "Hold on, honey." Emily fumbled with the phone, looking for the right button. "Okay, we're on. Dad, can you hear me?" "I hear you, Megsy." "Dad, listen carefully. You're not allowed on Storrow Drive. It's a parkway. No trucks, buses, or RVs allowed on Storrow Drive." "Yeah, well, it's a little late for that piece of news, honey." Emily looked down between her legs. "Okay, Dad, listen. There are bridges, low bridges. You've got to get off Storrow." "Stan," Emily yelled, "that bridge up ahead only has a 12-foot clearance." Stan slammed on the brakes to slow their rig to a crawl. He checked his side mirror, then edged to the middle of the road, straddling the lane. "If you stay in the middle, I think we can clear it," Emily said. "Dad, what are you doing?" Car horns echoed off the walls of the overpass as Stan inched the RV through the short tunnel, sticking to the center line and taking up space in both lanes. As they finally emerged from the underpass, Emily gave Stan a silent high five. "Dad, the next bridge is the Longfellow. It only has an 11-foot clearance." "Oh, shit. We have to get off this road," Emily said. "Any suggestions as to how?" "Pull over." "Where?" "Here, in the right lane. Everyone else can go around you." "Mom, Dad, what are you doing?" "Hang on a minute, Megan." Stan braked to a stop. "Now what?" Honking cars whizzed around the RV. Emily grabbed Stan's phone from the cup holder and punched in 911. When the dispatcher answered, she said, "We have an out-of-state RV that needs a squad for a turnaround assist on Storrow Drive. It's eastbound between Harvard Bridge and the Longfellow Bridge. This is retired Michigan police officer Emily Remington. The vehicle has stopped in the right lane and will remain stationary until the assist arrives." She paused, listening for a moment, then said, "Thank you." Stan's knuckles on the steering wheel were white in contrast to the rising red in his face. Moments later, they heard the wailing of a police siren. She focused on the side mirror, watching as a squad car positioned itself to let those vehicles stuck immediately behind them pull around and be on their way, but blocking all other traffic to give the RV room to maneuver. The officer didn't bother to get out of his car, but rolled down the window and waved for Stan to drive the Winnie across the lanes, over the boulevard divide, and into the opposing lanes of traffic. Stan grunted and shifted the RV, moving it forward and back in a clumsy 12-point turn. Emily bit her tongue, seeing his face redden even more at the long line of cars piling up impatiently behind the angled squad. People stepped out of their vehicles to snap cell phone pics of the renegade RV and its companion VW Bug straddling the lanes. "What's going on?" Megan's frantic voice broke the silence. Emily quickly shut the speakerphone off. "I'll call you back in a couple of minutes," she said, and then shut the phone off completely. She gritted her teeth as Stan bumped the rig up and over the curb. She could hear the cups and glasses in the cupboards behind them rattle violently. Stan seemed to hesitate a moment while cars in the westbound lane whizzed past, but then he eased the rig forward. Emily braced herself and held her breath, watching the oncoming cars in the nearest lane slam to a stop. Cars in the far lane zipped around them, narrowly avoiding the wildly jerking RV as it bumped down off the curb, tugging the little car behind them. A moment later, Stan had all 10 wheels on the pavement, and they were in their lane, heading safely west. The squad car pulled away, letting the eastbound traffic flow again. Emily breathed out for the first time in what seemed to be one of the longest moments of her life. She resisted the temptation to switch the air conditioning knob to high and direct the vents to blast her face with cold air, even though her hot flash had ramped up to high gear. Stan slowed the RV and positioned it again down the center of the road to creep under the Cambridge Street Bridge one last time. His face was about as deep red as she had ever seen it, and his jaw was clenched so tight she wondered if he'd be able to move it or eat or speak again. But once they were out from under the bridge and headed back toward the ramp to the freeway, he rolled his shoulders, shaking away the tension. Well, that was fun, he said, cracking his jaw.
As an RV driver, I have to say this bad dream is frequently recurrent and is right up there with the naked public speaking dream. In terms of how awful.
We did one day find ourselves crossing over a bridge that had a weight limit. And we kind of looked at each other like maybe they should have mentioned that a couple miles ago. Because I'm pretty sure we were over that weight
by
limit.
about a ton.
And I remember going over it, wondering what happens. Is it going to crack under us? But tell our horrifying RV story when we had first gotten it and it malfunctioned in a way RVs are not supposed to.
And what was the malfunction?
When the slider came out.
Oh, we were going through Iowa, a very remote part of Iowa, and all of a sudden I've noticed in my left side mirror that I'm not looking at the road anymore. I'm looking at what appears to be the side of the RV.
And we were very new to it, so it's just like, oh, that's kind of weird.
And I'm in the right lane, and a truck is blasting by me, honking its horn like crazy, because I'm actually in his lane. The slider had come out, and there I am, And we're like, what am I supposed to do now? And I have this wonderful RV insurance, which if you give them a call, they're going to dispatch service wherever you are, right? And they're on the exit, and they're like, sorry, we have nobody near you. You're on your own. And I was like, what am I going to do? Well,
it was awful.
Yes, we finally did get it kind of pushed back in, and then went very slowly after that till we got to her son's house, to park it. But that was a disaster.
It was really scary, and it's supposed to be built in a way that's absolutely impossible. But something malfunctioned, and there we were flying down the road slider. I didn't realize it because we were so new to driving. But you have, only because we're short on time and I can't ask all the questions I want to, which happens all the time. Can you tell our 8.25 million listeners, because you just got us a few more because you're so good.
Yes,
it's just
we've been tabulating.
Particularly amazing, as we're pre-recorded and they haven't even heard it yet, but you're that good. Tell us a little bit about your new book, Courting the Sun, and how that came to be.
So that one I'm doing on my own. I'm kind of like you were. I'm a great collaborator, and I've written screenplays with another writer, and Mary Joy and I've written these, and I've done a lot of collaborating. But Courting the Sun was my first historical novel and my first solo project, and it arose out of research I did into my own genealogy. I'm probably like 3/4 French Canadian. And I had learned that back in the 1600s, Louis XIV wanted to have his own colony, just like the Brits had down in the, along the New England coast and stuff. And he wasn't having a lot of success. All he had were fur traders and bear hunters and soldiers over there. So he started in 1663, I think, recruiting young women to go over. And in a 10-year period, he said, well, I will pay your passage, I'll pay your dowry, I'll pay you for babies you have, I'll give you a trousseau. And in a 10-year period, about 750 women took him up on it. And these women now are called Filles du Roi, Daughters of the King, because he sponsored them. And for French Canadians, it's kind of like being a descendant of the Mayflower, except that most French Canadians are descended from these women and are descended from numerous of them. So I have at least, at the last count, 20 7th and 8th great grandmothers who were part of this group.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so it caused me to wonder what would cause a young woman to leave France and cross the ocean at that time and go off and marry, a soldier or a fur trader. And so I came up with a fictional woman. I decided to have my own fictional woman, not one of my own great grandmothers, because their lives were, remarkable in one way, but not in a novel way. And I decided that my fictional character would be an actual bastard daughter of Louis XIV, but she doesn't know it until quite some time after she's been to court. And so that story is the story of a young girl, 17-ish, who gets invited to court and discovers what life at court is like, the good and then the bad, and eventually discovers she's the bastard daughter of the king. And that brings its own problems. So, yeah.
That sounds like a fascinating book. How was it going from collaborating to working on your own? Did you feel like you were being, I don't know, dropped off a cliff or, abandoned?
It was scary because I didn't have Mary Joy to write all my
Except I
description.
did help edit it.
Oh yeah, she did. She actually did a lot of editing. I also joined a critique group, and that helped a lot because they looked at my pages and told me what was working and what wasn't working. And I had beta readers, and so yeah, it was quite an effort.
Yeah,
But
I'm a huge fan of writers' critique groups. Although I was lucky, the very first one I went to, Night Writers, I was with them for 13 years, pretty much until COVID and moving to Duluth, and now we're in Tennessee. They were fantastic. I've heard that, you can stumble into some bad ones where people are competitive and they'd rather rip each other apart than be helpful. Mine was great, and it sounds like yours was too.
yeah.
So where can people find you online?
So right now, the best way to find us, we had a website for the book, but I've collapsed that into my own personal website. And so it's peggywilliamsauthor.com.
Okay.
And pretty easy to find. And then there's a tab for our books. Mary Joy enjoys writing when we're together, but her superpower is quilting. And so,
Yep. I'd rather be quilting than at the computer typing.
I-
That is a Wisconsin superpower.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That and cheese.
Yeah.
Yes, that and
That
cheese.
and cheese.
Laura, where can we find your links?
So Michael, my normal co-host, is at aperfectpint.net.
I'm the
and
abnormal.
He is the abnormal. He is very abnormal. Trust me. But very handy for building things and, picking up rabbits, which I hate doing because they scratch me. So I am at lauravosica.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on, various things. I have a YouTube channel, Bluebells Chronicles. I'm on Instagram, but I haven't used it in years. Michael and I together, my normal co-host.
Again, I'm the abnormal.
We're at booksandbrews.net, and we have a Facebook page that I sometimes keep active, and we have a YouTube channel, which you can find at symbol Books and Brews. We have an Instagram page, which again is pretty inactive. So,
Do we have any upcoming events at all?
do you two have any upcoming events?
other than the new book coming out, no, we just had a reading and book signing at a local library, and I had a workshop that I gave at another nearby city library over the summer. So we've had a couple events that way, but nothing specific coming up yet.
Okay. And if people keep an eye on your website, they'll probably see anything that you do have coming up.
Yeah. And we also were on Facebook. So we both each have our own Facebook pages. And then we do have an MJ Williams Facebook page as well.
That's
that
good.
we keep updated.
And Laura, what's coming next month?
Next month, we have Michael, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Michael Zucker. He combines action, history, political intrigue, and more into his novels, The Eisenhower Chronicles, and again, am I even close on the pronunciation?
Leopleurodon.
Leopleurodon, the master of the deep. Apparently you know all about Leopleurodons.
Apparently I do. Yeah. It's a side effect of my abnormality.
I hope I'm not sleeping on the couch tonight. So yes, next week we have action and adventure and history to look forward to. A complete contrast to getting the RV stuck under a bridge, right? It's more action than I
Made my
want.
heart, yes, just jump.
Well, thank you very much for being our guest. It was a delight to meet both of you.
Oh, thank you for having us. This is great. And
Cheers.
love your drinks.
Yeah.